Hi, everybody. This is Madhav here from the Remote Marketing Podcast. I'm really glad to have a guest on the episode today. Today we've got Steve Toth. He was, like the former SEO strategy lead at FreshBooks, and I think he's been doing SEO strategy for over 10 years. He runs a newsletter called the SEO Notebook, which I'm personally big fan of. Lots of great stuff in there. And so I just thought, I'll get him on to the episode and kind of just chat a little bit about, like managing SEO budgets and like some of his experience from FreshBooks and the other companies that he's worked at. Glad to have you here, Steve. How's it going?
I'm glad to be here. It's going great. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Um, all right, so I think Steve, I think let's kind of just start with. So I was just kind of looking at your LinkedIn, right? So like I think you've kind of went solo just about approximately a year back, but I think before that, I think you were roughly there at FreshBooks for about 2 years, right? So in May 2018 is when you joined FreshBooks. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I'd actually been with FreshBooks since around spring of 2018,
Okay.
and I actually just went out on my own in March, right before COVID. But I had been freelancing and like burning some serious midnight oil over the last year, starting my own business, and then finally in just like late February of this year, 2020, decided to make the jump.
Got it. Okay. Okay. So let's kind of go back to May 2018, right? When you started at FreshBooks, I mean the spring when you kind of started, right? So what was kind of like the state then, for like SEO at FreshBooks and everything? And like just kind of give me a little bit of background, like why were you kind of brought on board, and like how and what did you decide to do in like the next 90 days? Because and the reason I'm kind of asking this question was just that I looked at like the organic traffic data in Ahrefs like today it was FreshBooks, and it seems like I think when you came on for about 8 or 9 months, FreshBooks was kind of at like a flat pace of growth. And then I think somewhere around January 2019, it just kind of had like a meteorical rise in organic traffic. Obviously, there's not. I mean, we can't really rely on the data 100%, but I think it speaks a little bit. So I'm guessing there's a lot of stuff that you worked on in the initial couple of months that kind of contributed to that growth. So let's kind of walk into like the first 90 days of like your story of how you entered FreshBooks, and how you kind of went ahead with like making changes in the strategy or additions to the strategy.
Yeah, for sure. So when I was brought in, it was a very much a complete rebuild of the marketing department, the acquisition team specifically. We had a new VP of marketing, a guy named Bart Melenda at the time, and he basically took it upon himself to completely build that team from scratch. And I think FreshBooks had actually been without an SEO manager for about 4 or 5 months prior to hiring me. I don't know like the exact specifics around it, but I was hired in the spring, and we actually encountered some serious setbacks at the beginning of all of that. Because so just a little note about FreshBooks is that everybody who joins a company spends 1 month in the support department, like learning the product,
Hmm.
which is a really cool, like sort of interesting way to have people join. But with that, like that meant that I wasn't in my seat for the first month of being there, and
Hmm.
we had employed an agency, quite an expensive agency, out of San Francisco. I won't name their name, but literally like my first week out of support, I was looking at some recommendations they made around redirecting 50 pages on the site, and I was like, oh no. Let's not do this. And it was my job to QA them. They're like, okay, so the SEO agency made these recommendations. Steve, can you take a look at them? And as I'm looking at them, I'm like, oh hell no. Like, why are we doing this? And this is like post the recommendations being made, and I pleaded with the devs to like roll this back before Google crawled it, and Google did end up crawling it before we were able to do that, and we actually suffered like quite a serious decline in our average position for these invoice template pages that they decided they wanted to consolidate. So when you see like there's actually like a little decline at the beginning of when I joined FreshBooks, that's actually what it was. So the next few months were actually quite painful because we were dealing with the decision that this agency had made, and then yeah, like we were finally like able to spend the fall of 2018 sort of planning our next move with relaunching those pages and reversing those redirects and all that kind of stuff. And then yeah, in January we finally right in the end, actually last day before the Christmas holidays, we launched our new pages, and then we started to see a lot of growth after that.
Got it. Okay. And so, like, I mean, so probably like in the first couple of weeks or so, you obviously saw, like there was this agency and they had, like like not so great ways. I mean, suggestions or recommendations, and then you kind of worked on improving that. And so let's kind of talk about. You said you were part of the acquisition team and everything, right? Like, so what is the SEO team like, and how did the SEO team kind of fit into the marketing and the acquisition team as such? Like, what is the structure like at FreshBooks?
Yeah, so we had an amazing director of acquisition, a guy named Chris Sisko, who I look up to and respect immensely. He came over from working at Saatchi as their VP search, so like quite a high up position there. And he really believed in SEO and SEM and really all channels like affiliates, marketplaces, paid social, programmatic, and stuff. And Chris gave us pretty much complete freedom, which was amazing. Like he, just trusted us. Like he obviously wanted to kind of know which direction that we were going to go in. And for us in 2019, that was invoice templates and this section that we call the resource hub. And once he understood the strategy that we were doing, he pretty much let us spend the budget like the way we wanted to around that. And like I'll never forget for that opportunity, because it literally opened so many doors for me and just allowed me to meet like the most amazing people. And yeah, like our story there is really like we ended up letting go of that agency that I spoke about prior, and I started to just hire experts in very narrow fields of SEO. So I hired strategists, I hired link builders, I hired technical people, but I didn't hire them all under one agency. I hired like very specific independent consultants to help us out with all that.
Okay. So in terms of like the SEO team, you said it was you, and there was this this tech SEO person, and then like like a bunch of like link building freelancers agencies. There wasn't any other full-time person in SEO. Was that the case? Apart from the two of you?
No, but like yeah, the director of acquisition has SEO knowledge. He has his own affiliate sites and stuff like that. He's fairly knowledgeable. But yeah, it was really just myself for a long time, and then my colleague Wesley was hired in like the late fall of 2018. So he came on board and like actually just helped with things like the internationalization of our website. Just yeah, like basically like site speed and stuff like that is what his focus was on, whereas mine was like guiding and creating like the strategy.
Got it. Okay. Interesting. So and I'm guessing like when we kind of talk about KPIs, right? Like the metrics that you were reporting to the VP of search, was that, I mean, was it trials, rankings, organic traffic, or was there some other metric, or is it just a bunch of these metrics itself?
Yeah. Yeah, so we reported on a few things. Like we actually like it was quite cool because as we started to do really well, we got a lot of FaceTime with the VP of marketing,
Mm-hmm.
Bart, because he was just kind of, he enjoyed the acquisition. Like it was just something that he liked. And you know, out of a marketing department of like 60 people, we were meeting with him on a weekly basis, whereas like the other teams hardly got any FaceTime with him. So I think I'm like a bit of like, what, like, you know, from other teams. But so when we had those meetings, we reported on something called share of voice from the
Mm-hmm.
tool getstat.com. We were tracking all our rankings in there.
Okay.
And we would basically be able to tell like over a broad set of keywords, like how are we doing. So like, for example, a high volume keyword ranking number one takes up a larger share of that voice versus medium volume keyword ranking number
Mm-hmm.
one. Does all those calculations for you and tells you like, you know, how much sort of market share you're actually owning in the SERP. And that specific stat would bubble its way up right to the top when Bart did his reporting.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one. And then obviously trials. Trials are extremely important. And then because we're working with like FreshBooks as a SaaS company and working with in B2B, um, the uh, the cohorts don't mature right away, so it takes a certain amount of time for people to actually upgrade. So we were only able to look at upgrades like months later.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we also did report on that as well.
Got it. Okay. And so, I was just kind of looking at like the, it's just funny. Right now I'm at your LinkedIn page, and then, right in there, you've got written, like this tangible accomplishments. And then, I think that you kind of really smashed through the trials goal, right? Like in 2019, like, what was the goal for 2018? You kind of did that in like the 140 days. Um, and so an interesting question here would be that, um, let's like FreshBooks had like like I said with Hrefs, the data that it shows, and what you also said was that it was flat for many years. FreshBooks has been around for many years, right? And every business goes through that flat thing, right? Like they'd grow a little and then they'd be flat for about 7-8 months, and then they kind of have to push past that brick and then kind of go a little ahead and everything, right? And it seems like that also happened for FreshBooks, and probably was the big reason you had that increase, right? So do you think it was because of some new big initiatives that you kind of championed towards, or was it just really the small nitty gritty work, primarily the one that you talked about, like reversing the redirects and everything that the agency had done, or was it just equally divided between the nitty gritty work as well as the new initiatives?
It was two major initiatives. So it was a relaunch of our invoice templates pages. So invoice template itself at the time was getting 200,000 searches a month globally.
Mm-hmm.
And we also verticalized that page for different professions and different file types. So we had like invoice template PDF, Word, Google Docs, and then also professions like contractor, graphic designer, auto repair.
Mm-hmm.
And we had separate pages for all of those different things. And so that was the one that really drove the most trials and
Mm-hmm.
upgrades, and initially like really increased the traffic. But the one that just took it right over the top was our resource hub. So in like summer of 2018, we were able to go to the executive meeting at a like offsite meeting, and we were able to pitch for additional budget because there was some remaining budget left over. So I actually wore I had a T-shirt made that said SEO, but it had a dollar sign for the S, and and I wore that in front of the executives for that pitch, and we got a whole pile of money as a result. And like what my boss ended up saying with that like additional budget was he's like, I want you to produce 1,000 articles. And it was like, the idea was like top, mid, bottom funnel, build remarketing lists, capture emails, like with these articles, stuff like that. And I was like, okay, like, I guess, right? Where the hell am I going to get 1,000 topics from? So that was my problem, being the strategy person. And I just said, you know what, like, let's just do all the people also ask questions like around accounting that you see in Google. So
Mm-hmm.
we literally sourced like thousands of these. We ended up arriving at around 500 with their own subtopics too.
Mm-hmm.
And with that budget increase, we hired 5 writers to come into FreshBooks for 3 months and do nothing but writing in this like small room. So
Mm-hmm.
we just had this war room going on for these writers. And then when we finally got all this content uploaded, like in the spring of 2019, we really didn't know what to kind of expect. But then it just started to slowly pick up, and by the fall, it had doubled organic traffic, and by now it's tripled it. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the last time I actually looked in, we were getting 24,000 visits a day from that set of pages, that those
Wow.
550 articles that we published.
That's amazing. So I mean, could you just like give a little bit of background about the resource hub that you're talking about, right? Like, what is the intention behind it? Why did that idea come up? And like, what is the I know you mentioned that 1,000 articles and everything, but like, what triggered you to kind of put in some budget for that? And like, go to that executive meeting and like, pitch for that. Hey, you know what? Be awesome to kind of have a little bit more budget for the resource hub. Like, where is it? Because yeah, it'd be awesome for the listeners to kind of have a background about this particular strategy.
Well, we didn't pitch the specific strategy to the execs. Like, usually they don't like to get like too into the details of things.
Mm-hmm.
But what we did pitch was what my boss called the digital marketing framework, where you have like your SEO content that can like feed into remarketing lists, and how PPC can also inform SEO, and then the emails that you collect could become audience lists for your paid social. So it was this big like integrated chart of how everything worked together, and that's what we sort of sold.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually sold that to the whole company, like by doing like a presentation at one of the all hands meetings with everybody there, like all 350 people. And it was like after that we started to get like a lot of recognition within the company that we were doing something kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, and then the idea for that was really just like, I don't even remember like what, like I was probably like taking a walk or having a shower or something like that, the cliched stuff. But whenever I force myself to kind of like, really like sit down and like think of things, even like my notes, I don't sit down and say like, okay, what do I have to do today? I'm just always aware of the issues and challenges and problems that I have to solve. They're
Mm-hmm.
always with me, and then eventually a solution comes out when I kind of don't expect it to. So all I knew was I had this challenge of like getting 500 article topics, and I knew that researching these things one by one would have been a complete nightmare. And we also knew that like FreshBooks had a super strong like domain rating, domain authority,
Mm-hmm.
and that if we just wrote more SEO focused articles, that we'd probably do really well.
Got it. Got it. Got it. It's I'm guessing like with you kind of with all of your strategizing and everything, it's pretty similar to kind of the notes that you kind of send out in the SEO notebook newsletters. So like, do you like have like a running list? Like, whenever you get some idea, you just kind of create a note in like, I don't know, Google Keep or a to-do list or whatever, and then just keep like a running list of like 400, 500 things, and ultimately whenever particular time comes, you just pick that one up and then just put some money and budget onto it. Is that how?
Yeah, well, the only budget is my time for SEO Notebook. It doesn't really cost me any money to do it. Yeah, so I have something like 200 notes in the queue, like just
Hmm.
stuff that I'm picking up all the time. But to be honest, I usually pick something that I learned that week or very recently, just because it's usually easier for me to write if I'm inspired by something,
Hmm.
and then I'll just go for it. But yes, there are times like where I think of something or I'm reading something and my wife's like, "What are you doing over there?" I'm just like taking a note, and then and then I go into the next room.
Got it. Got it. Interesting. Okay. All right. So now let's just talk about, let's talk about the SEO budget. First of all, did you have, were you given an SEO budget immediately, when you joined? Was that kind of discussed on, or was that something that was handed over kind of later, after like a conversation with the VP of search?
Yeah, so we actually will have a budget every year, but when I joined, like I mentioned, there was no SEO manager for 4 or 5 months, and we were rebuilding the department. So that budget that we did have was actually given to other teams. So we didn't
Okay.
have much of a budget, and that happens in companies all the time, where the CMO is like, everybody gets their budget at the beginning of the year, but if the CMO wants to like go and do a brand campaign on TV or whatever, he or she has got to go in and borrow a bunch of budget.
Hmm.
So that can happen, and that did happen. So when that summer came around, like they knew that we didn't have much, so that's where we were able to pitch for that incremental increase.
Got it. Okay. Okay. Cool. Okay. So then, you were given an SEO budget, the increase in budget or whatever the existing budget was, right? Let's assume, I'm someone new. I just joined, as an SEO manager at a new company. I just moved from an SEO specialist to an SEO manager role. And I've been given a budget, right? So what would you recommend that person to kind of, like, how to kind of go ahead with that budget, like where to spend what, how to kind of pace things out, and just like a general framework of like how you manage an SEO budget.
Yeah, so for me, it was definitely not going to be with the agency that we were with. Like when we were working with them, honestly, we were educating them on SEO. Like should have been the other way around, but we were like, okay, read this cool thing, want to test this cool thing. Have you heard of this? No, I haven't heard of this. Like it was really, really bad. So in terms of an agency, like I guess the pro is that you have one relationship to manage. You can delegate a bunch of stuff to them. It's easier, but I always like, having worked at agencies, and all of us from that rebuilt acquisition team, we all came from agencies, and that was an intentional move from the VP marketing. He
Hmm.
wanted specifically people who had worked at agencies, and so we knew like the realities of what an agency life is, right? Agency life is working on multiple clients, not having enough time to do a good job. I mean, I will generalize here, but I will say that most
Hmm.
people probably listening to this who work at agencies would agree. And for us, like, and it also means like junior employees on accounts, because typically people who work at agencies are less experienced than people who work in-house, or obviously people who work for themselves. So I would highly encourage anybody who's managing a budget to like actually look to specific independent consultants, because that's what I did. And that offers you a number of benefits, because you get to immerse yourself in all these cool people who are also connected with each other and can introduce you to people. And then you suddenly get on a first name basis with people who are known in the industry, and I took full advantage of that, full disclosure. And then you also get people who are more accountable. for the work that they do because it's their name on it, right? Like they may have a team that helps them, but ultimately you're speaking to the business owner, you're speaking to that specific either strategist, technical SEO person, link builder, whatnot. And I just found that to be a much better relationship, and it's actually cheaper too when you look at the costs and what you get working with a sort of all-in-one agency versus like working with specific experts and with narrow fields of expertise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. So then with you said you worked with some link building agency, sometimes some specific consultants who are experts in certain things, right? I've got two questions here. The first is, how do you find like good consultants? There are, like, for example, you've got a ton of people on Upwork. You can contact people through LinkedIn. You can contact people through here and there, right? And they'd be like, oh, you know what? I've got this one client. I grew them from, I don't know, 10K to 200K or whatever in like a year, right? But like, so what's kind of like, how do you identify like this would be a great person to work with? I definitely want to kind of, hire them.
Yeah, so for me it was like I love SEO so much. Like I know who's who in on Twitter, on LinkedIn, maybe a lesser degree, but on Facebook too, Facebook groups. I knew who was who, right? And for me, like actually, like and I see it with myself. The people who produce their own content are
Mm-hmm.
usually pretty awesome because they're putting their own thoughts out there on the web, and offering a lot of value, asking nothing in return, just building up like their brand. And 9 times out of 10, like those are the people that do the best work.
Mm-hmm.
um, of course there is some guy like off in like the remote corners of his basement who's just killing it, making 100K affiliate revenue a year, who's
Mm-hmm.
amazing, not going to be a
Yeah.
hireable consultant. But there are a lot of folks out there with great blogs and who offer a lot of value, and that's kind of how I chose them, and that's really like what I've known them. Like I've known like the different folks that I've hired, like I've known of them for like some over a decade, right? So
Mm.
just building, yeah, like that know, like, and trust thing that they have, and then just approaching them simply and saying, I work for X company and we're looking to do this.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay. And I definitely agree. I think there are a lot of, obviously, people who kind of write. They're obviously, I think when you write, you kind of understand things from just a very foundational level, which I think makes a lot of sense to kind of find those people, right? Then when it seems like when you were kind of managing the SEO budget, there were like, let's say you came in, you knew that there are like these 50 things that you need to work on. There are 4 or 5 big projects that would be kind of that you have a lot of expertise in, and that you can kind of push them forward yourself. And then there are certain things that are better suited for more specially skilled experts, or might just be grunt work, right? um, so in those cases, right, like for example, there might be certain bits of it, like let's take for example, um, content, creating articles, all of that probably might be kind of like part of your DNA, right? But maybe, and I could be totally wrong here, but maybe let's say programmatic SEO is something that's part of the strategy, which is probably not your special skill set, right? So do you just kind of like just find someone who's kind of like way more knowledgeable than you, and kind of like just get a second opinion on them about programmatic SEO, or you just trust them on hand? Because I think the big concern with this is that um, I think there's a problem with me as well, is that if I don't know something, it's a little difficult for me to kind of hire, like for example with programmatic SEO, I'm not very good at it. And if I hire someone, just assuming that they're good at it, I don't really know what good means in programmatic SEO, right? So how do you kind of like, you know, like, I
Yeah,
don't know.
so it was helpful. It's helpful to have two heads, like, and that's when I worked at FreshBooks initially, it was only me, and then the director of acquisition decided to bring in a second person, and
Mm-hmm.
I felt that was like amazing, because then you have two people who are, focusing on the same stuff day in and day out. They can bounce ideas off each other. We can also talk about, what we thought of this consultant versus another. And, I think just looking at, like, I'll give you the example of like internationalization. So
Mm-hmm.
setting all of that stuff up correctly, on the website, subfolders, targeting, hreflang, and all that kind of stuff. It's not something that either of us did before.
Mm-hmm.
So we hired somebody who like specialized in that, and helped guide us through that entire project. So that would be like something where, is a very appropriate way to spend our budget, and then call on the expertise of somebody to
Mm-hmm.
guide us with that. So like in terms of evaluating that, the person we ended up hiring, had a lot of content on the web around that helped,
Mm-hmm.
uh, show the expertise there.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, cool. All right. So let's talk about, right now we're in this very weird phase, with the whole COVID, and, SEO traffic is kind of dipped for some people. For some, it's grown. For some, it's just flat. The intent is up and down, and there are all sorts of updates happening, right? Um, as such, because you've been very keenly following SEO, and you've been in the space for more than a decade now. What interesting SEO trends do you kind of foresee in like the next 2 years?
I don't think that much of SEO really changes. Like, to be honest, like there's like if you look at like a scale of like 1 to 100, there's like an 80% there that's like always going to be, do these things. And then Google is just like twisting the knobs on everything else for these different updates just to throw people off. So I think that in general, like one of the things that, like, if you just step back a moment and you think 10 years ago, right, Google didn't have the same amount of content that exists on the web that it does today. It arguably may have like a shortage of content to rank for any like niche query or whatever, right? So you used to see things like random forums ranking and like just all kinds of stuff that because there wasn't good content to take its place. But now, like, there's no shortage of content on any given search query has like a glut of content that it could rank. So now what I think is happening is like Google's like, okay, you guys did a good job. Like there's tons of great content to create,
Mm-hmm.
and larger companies now, with, I see on LinkedIn like a few different content managers who I'm connected with. Like these folks are like super smart and they understand like what kind of content draws search traffic, and they're starting to produce these at mass rates. So that means that you're seeing a lot of larger companies start to dominate the SERPs because they're taking advantage of all these. They're seeing opportunity where right now a site that's DR30 has strong position. They walk in there with like a DR80 and just blow them out of the water. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that trend is going to continue. I, I think companies are going to invest in SEO more than they ever have. So, with that, like, I also feel that you've got to have like a really strong brand. You've got to have some natural links happening, as well as the links that you build to really like solidify you and help you compete in that space. And like personally, like what I'm trying to do is focus on working with sites that are already established,
Mm-hmm.
and where I feel like the lead up is not like too crazy. Like within 6 months, we can start to see major gains, kind of thing, versus like a 2 year. Really, like, if I'm working with basically this, so if I'm working with a company that's brand new, I want them to like really be committed to things like PR, pillar page content, like all that stuff from the beginning, or else I don't think that many sites are going to survive without that. So to go back to your specific question, I think Google's got like all the content it needs to choose from. Content managers at larger sites are just continuing to produce content that's outranking them. You look at like Forbes ranking for best vacuum cleaners and stuff like that, like a perfect example of it. And then the SERPs continuing to favor these large sites who are encroaching upon these different SERPs that have some opportunities left. So it doesn't bode that well for the little guy, to be honest, unless you're kind of really strategic and go after medium to long tail like gold keywords. But that's sort of the trend that I see. And I think it's pretty hard to argue that that's not going to continue.
Got it. Okay. I mean, slightly demotivating news for people with a small SEO budget. But I mean, so if like if you if there's a small business guy who just comes in and says that I don't have a budget to do like PR and like SEO and a little bit of social media and content partnerships and all of that, right? And it's generally advisable too, right? Like when you're kind of going from 0 to 1 million in revenue, it's always good to kind of focus on like one channel, one thing, do that really well, versus kind of like doing many different things and kind of like really widening your focus. What would you recommend for these small businesses with a much smaller SEO budget? How can they survive when this is happening? Like I think a good example of what you just said was like, let's take for example invoice templates. FreshBooks ranks for it. If you just go on Google right now, there's I think the top 10 pages that are kind of ranking for it have like domain authority over 80 or something, which is obviously not great news. So one of the things you mentioned for small businesses with a small SEO budget is to focus on the long tail keywords. That's a big opportunity. What else?
Yeah, I think local SEO is still a viable channel for a lot of. I mean, it's all depending on what your competition is. So, some cities in smaller cities in US, Canada, wherever you are probably going to have a lot lower competition than a national SERP like invoice template. So with SEO, just always keep in mind that you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be better than what's on page one. So if your competition is not great, then yeah, it's probably viable for you to spend 6 months and get some really good gains. But if you're like a brand new like law firm in Los Angeles and it's extremely competitive, then you need to do some really special stuff to get in there. With regards to like local SEO, I think one of the biggest like underrated things that us can do is put like images on your listing, get customers to take images. There's something called the Google Vision API where if you upload your pictures to it, like it'll show you what Google sees in the pictures in terms of like entities and like different categories and like all the text that's in the image is read. So that gives you clues in terms of how Google interprets the images that you upload to it. So just like flooding your listing with really relevant images related to your business can go a super long way. So that would be something that I would want to do. And also with Google local, with Google My Business, just like as many natural things as you can do, I think ultimately, improve the listings visibility. And of course, there's also like a lot of gray and black hat stuff you can do too, but I won't go into the details.
Got it. Okay, cool. All right. I'm in the final set of questions. One quick thing that I was curious about, the team that you worked with at FreshBooks, marketing of 60 people and the SEO team and everything, right? Of course, the contractors and agencies were 100% remote, right? They were probably at different places. Was the team was the team remote too? Were you all based in an office?
We were all based in the office. Yeah.
Okay, all right. And so you've moved
Right now
from.
we're remote.
I'm sorry,
right,
what?
right now, since the beginning of COVID, we've been remote.
Got it. Okay, okay. And so it must have been like, and this is probably the first time that you've probably started working remote. Is that correct? Or have you done that before?
Well, yeah, currently right now I'm under contract to FreshBooks, and then I
Mm-hmm.
have my own business as well. Like, so I work for FreshBooks like 2 days a week, and
Mm-hmm.
then the other 3 days I'm working on my own clients. But yeah, it's the first time where I've had like an extended work from home. Yeah, but we've had pretty lax policies at FreshBooks. Like we could work from home whenever we wanted,
Mm-hmm.
but that was never a problem. But yeah, this is my first extended period of doing that.
Got it. And then what's been your initial impression like, working
Uh,
with teams for like many years together in an office and now just suddenly, at home. Um, any good things and bad things?
well, one of the good things is I've lost about 7 pounds because I don't go for lunch every day. um but yeah, I like it. I mean, like, I'm pretty introverted. Like, I don't do a whole lot of socializing. There's always like food and like after work kind of things at FreshBooks, and I'm just kind of like, I keep my head down and just do my work. So I actually really like the remote thing. I'm always very connected to people in my space. Like, I talk to SEO folks like every day. So I never feel like that distance. And like, for me, like, being at home is like nice and comfortable. So
Hmm.
I want, like, when I went out on my own, like, I expected to be doing this like and I hope, things are going really well, despite COVID. So I, don't see any reason to sort of change this right now.
Got it. Okay, cool. All right. So, one last question. So, can you just give like a 1 minute, like an overview of, the story of SEO Notebook? I think you started that. You're probably at like the 1 year mark, right? Like you're celebrating your anniversary, right? So, how, like, what is the intention behind starting SEO Notebook? And for the listeners listening, like why should they kind of sign up for the SEO Notebook?
Cool. So thanks for asking me. So basically, like, I'm totally obsessed with SEO, and I'd always been reading stuff, in Facebook threads, on groups, and whole lot of different places. And it was to a point where it was like losing sleep, because I would be thinking like, okay, I really want to try that tomorrow, and then like remember that. And then I just made a post on SEO Signals Lab, a really popular group, and said, like, what do you guys do to basically keep track of everything? And then I was like, okay, well, I'm going to try Evernote. And then, like, the same day that I tried it, I was like, it'd be really cool if I just like started an email list, and like every week I would just email one page of my strategy notebook with like one simple strategy that was actually like something you could try that day. And I would do that once a week. And so I was like, okay, and bought the domain the same day. It was my first premium domain, SEOnotebook.com.
Hmm.
And then, yeah, like, I launched it right around the same time we were starting to have that like really good success with FreshBooks. And there was a little bit of buzz happening around the company and what we were doing with regards to SEO. So within 2 months, I hit 1,000 subscribers, and then within 1 year, I hit 3,700. So I'm pretty much on my way to 4,000 in the next month or so.
Woohoo! Nice. That's amazing. 4,000. Yeah. And yeah, personally, I think I love it. I don't know how I discovered it. I think it was kind of came through your profile, and then I saw that. It's interesting because I don't think you've kind of done a lot of promotion in terms of, like, I don't know, launching it on Product Hunt or something like that. But I think it's just one of those hidden resources that's there. And it's definitely something that I also recommend the team members, in my team here at Bonsai. So Yeah, I think pretty good job. And yeah, thanks a lot. I think those are all my questions.